So what we have here is a user interface, the way we've built it in the demo. This is actually the full application, where now when I hit the enter button, you can see there's a pop-up. And this is kind of the way we demoed it out. It's really a poor man's way of doing validation, but the rep ID must be an integer. This is a very cumbersome approach to this, and so there's a better way to go off and show this information. So what I can do instead is I can have a little pop-up here that would come in when the validation's happening. I just want to show you one of these real quick to get you started, and then we can follow the panel. So what I would do is I'd take a label over here, and this label, I can give it some preset text. So I can say ID required as int. All right. So yeah. So it actually extended out for me. And so I'm going to change this to be red text, so it shows up as an error message. And I'm going to change the variable name inside of this, so I can see this is ID error inside of here. So by default, this ID error will show up. So if I go run my code at this point, it shows up ID required as int. Now I don't want my errors to all show up right away. That's not the way I want my display to go, but I could go through and drag and drop and have all sorts of errors inside of here. So I can put this one inside of here and say first name required. All right, and I could again go to this guy, make it red, a different red. Yeah, this is a different red, but that's all right. So this could be a thing, and then I could again change this variable. This could be first name error. Now, just as a note, this text can be dynamic. I could change this text in my code. If I have more than one error message, it doesn't have to be fixed. But that's why we're labeling it, to have it show up. Now, again, if I go and run my code here, just because I like to run it frequently, you can see I have both of these error messages that are popping up. They're both there all the time. I don't have to have that. I can come down to another attribute inside of here, which is all the way down, I think. Maybe it's up top. Not enabled, not focusable. It should be visible, is what I'm looking for here. I didn't see it. I am missing it. All right, so I am missing the one I'm looking for, but I can do it in code here in a second. So let me just show you where it's going to come by. So again, when you hit the button, you can see they have validations going on. And this validation has a couple different messages that could pop up here. So must be greater than 0, must be an integer. So the exception's going on and everything like that. So there could be multiple messages. I'll show you that here in a second. So let me start with making this thing show up. So when there's an error, what I would normally show up the pop-up message here, what I can do is I can say ID error, control space, dot set visible. You see, there's the method in there, visible. I thought it was called visible, to be true. All right, and then here I can change this to be ID error dot set text to be whatever the message I want to have show up inside of here. And so down here I can do the same thing, where if on the exception where I would normally say it must be an integer, I can say set visible to be true. And then I can change the error message from that one to be this one's error message. Oops, I took too much there. I'm going to get rid of this text and replace it with that text. All right, and so you can see the good data is false, and all this there's other good validation things that this student has put into their work. So this changes a little bit. So now what's happening here is if I run the code, I'll show you a little bit of how this works. So I see I have ID is required. When I hit enter here, you can see now it's changed that text to be sales rep must be an integer. I can say -4, hit enter, you say sales rep has to be an ID greater than 0. The problem is it still shows up by default. If I go and I take this into being a valid number, you see it doesn't get that to go away. So I add that text there. I have to manage that text. So one of the things I want to do is, if it's good data, you see good data is equal to true, then I can say ID error dot set visible to be false. I can hide it. And I need to hide it somewhere to start with. So the two ways to do that is, as I said, I was looking here. Let me come back to this guy, and let me make my GUI a little bit wider so it can accommodate the message right away. If I look at this guy, I can see here. Oops, nope, it doesn't have visible inside of these IDs. It won't do it by default. So that's fine. It's a limitation of the GUI. I can come up top. I can say by hand, I can see ID error after I've initialized everything, that set visible to be false. I can hide it to begin with. And by the way, I should do the same thing for first name error dot set visible false. All right, so now I go off and run this. You see neither of them show up to start with. When I hit enter, sales rep must be an integer, and then that one's showing up, but it's not doing any of the rest of the validation here. So that's something else I wanted to talk about here for this student. I need to go change my structure a little bit in how I do my validation. And so if I come back down to this error message, you can see what they've done is when it fails, they do a return statement here. And so what's saying is, if the ID error fails, then I stop validating the rest of it. So I only do one at a time. So now I can remove that return statement. And I can remove this return statement. And then it'll go down to be the first name. And so then I go and I run this. And so here, when I hit enter, so not only did it give me the ID must be an integer, it gave me the first name must not be blank. It gave me both of them at the same time. And so all I need to do now, and all this student needs to do now, is keep working down each of these guys and replacing this pop-up with this label and then the text that's associated with it. Again, if there's only one error message, first name is required, I don't have to set the text. I can just leave the text there and have it be default. If there's multiple error messages, I just set the error messages and make it visible. So that validation is better, because I can, when I hit the button, evaluate everything at once, see all the error messages, and go from there. So long as the validation of one field doesn't depend on the next field. Like, for instance, if my first name is Tony, my last name can't be Tony as well. I can't be Tony Tony. Or Tony Tony Tony. Sorry, 80s band reference there. But the idea is, as long as they're not there, I can get all of my errors at once. I can fix everything at once, and then be more likely to fix it the next time, instead of having error, oops, first name must not be blank. Let me fix that. Error, oh, now last name must not be blank. Why won't you tell me everything that's wrong at once? Things like that. So that's a little bit of a next level. This is not required for this class. It's not required for these assignments. This is probably going to be required if you're going to be a job as a coder someday. You're probably going to want to understand how to do this, and somebody's going to ask you to do this sort of thing someday if you use user interfaces. So it's a little bit of some extra emphasis here. So again, in review, and this isn't the same code there, you're going to have something that's your own structure. That's okay. You can figure it out from yourself. But wherever before you saw the error messages like the pop-ups here, we're replacing those pop-ups with making the error label visible. Visible's true. If we need to, setting the text inside of there. And then we can't forget that when it's good data, when it's good data, when we know it's going to be true, then we can set it to false. Now, there's some other issues in the logic here. It's not totally perfect, because the good data should basically start true and stay true. I shouldn't have to set it to be true again, but it's still not bad to confirm it, except that if you do this all the time, any good data will set everything else to be good data. So you can't really do this all the time. This is not a great line. I'm glad it was here, because it shows me where to put my clear that error message logic, but it's not something that's going to be universal.